I was looking for something in my work as an actor that I didn't know. I didn't really know what it was, but I just felt like I would know it when it happened. And I was just searching for it. And then having it happen, like, and sure enough, I knew it. But like, there's just something, even when you can't put your finger on it, and I think that's again, that's part of the essential nature of this transcendent thing. There's something, and I don't know what it is, but there's something, and it's just pushing me along, or it's pulling me along, however you sense that thing, but it's there. And in many ways, that thing is more real than fucking anything else. You know what I mean? Even though you can't necessarily touch it, and you don't even know what it is. There's a reality to it that is more real than the fucking hand on your body. You know what I mean?
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Charlie, I'm trying to start a podcast here. All right. There you go. Hello, podcast people. It's another one of these things with Brandon and Evan. You've heard us before, and if this is your first time, well, welcome. You started on probably a pretty weird one, because we're going to be talking about transcending. And it's kind of complicated because, it's not exactly like we know where this will go. And recently we've been trying to actually do conversations that are like this, where it's like, we don't really have the answers. Let's just explore. So I'm just setting that up off the beginning. But I want to say this off the bat. This whole journey of transcending is kind of like, maybe you do things from a different reason. So for example, here's the example. Say it starts off survival. You got to find shelter, you got to hunt, get some food, you got to figure out how to survive, right? And your whole day becomes about staying warm, staying fed, staying alive. And then you transcend, you move beyond that. And your shelter's taken care of, and your food is taken care of. And these types of things are kind of under control. And you have leisure time, you have more time, spare time. Well, what do you do with that time? What becomes the necessity? And, a lot of people might find purpose out of the survival, but now if you have leisure, call survival work, right? But what if you don't have work? Now you've transcended to a time where instead of needing to go to work, you need to go to play. So what do you do with that? How do you work with that? Maybe that breaks the whole paradigm of how you've been thinking about the world, thinking about yourself, thinking about this life. And this, my friends, this is what we're going to try to investigate, and probably some other stuff. And we'll probably go down some rabbit holes.
Yep.
But Evan, go ahead, take it away. Tell them what you want to say.
Oh yeah,
Let's kick this off.
There's definitely some places that I want to go and explore with this one as well. So maybe just continuing to sort of set the table for this one. I think that one of the first things I want to address is just the word itself, transcending, because I think that that's a word that can have a lot of baggage for a lot of people. It can sound kind of woo-woo and all that sort of stuff. And I want to try and take it out of that space a little bit. But if you are woo-woo, by all means, I'm not knocking on that either. But I think that in many ways, like, the word transcending is a word that we need to transcend to a certain to a certain extent. Yeah. So, I mean, like, let's try and use this as, maybe reclaim this word for ourselves a little bit in terms of, what this whole thing means. And that's, I guess, will take me into this next part that I want to just sort of set things up with, which is the sort of that of, the artist perspective, and something that I guess maybe you could argue that this is simply my own sort of personal opinion slash belief, but I think that life and being a human being, is about transcendence, and I don't think that I'm the only one out there. And from the artist perspective, we can look at, the great works that have been done throughout human history. And if you look at so many of them, they're all about transcending, whether it's an incredible book, an incredible story, like even the movies we go and see, they're all about transcending. They're about people, overcoming something, becoming more than they were before. And great, paintings and whatever forms that they've arrived for whatever time, they're all pointing to some level of human transcendence usually, or pointing to something, transcendent in nature. Like we can look at, an incredible landscape or something, a painted landscape, and it suddenly it fills us with a feeling. It captures something, the essence of something that strikes us as something, other than just being a tree or a mountain. There's something more to it than that. And to me, that's kind of what interests me about this whole conversation about transcendence is, what is that thing that's underneath it all, that thing that we're pointing to, and even that thing that in our lives that we are directing ourselves to. What is underneath it all for us in what we do in our lives, and why might that be something important for us to really think about and contemplate?
Interesting, my man. Interesting.
I think we've each got I think we've each got, like, this is one. Normally we're kind of like, it's like, all right, yeah, like let's head down into this thing. But like, you've kind of got a direction you want to go with it, and I've got like a direction I kind of want to go with it. And I'm interested to seeing if these things line up and what all happens here.
Yeah. Like this, like, kind of there's a pairing and a conflict all at the same time, which is kind of nice. Something that I kind of want to continue on with your thought, though, which maybe will lead back to mine, I hope. I can only hope. Is you talked about how it's kind of this internal thing. And I was thinking, like, this concept of like, I've heard sculptors or like people who work with like wood or stone, where they talk about how the thing they're designing is inside the stone, and all they're doing is chipping away everything to find what's actually inside. Like David was found within the stone. It was already there, but he had to chip away all the parts that distracted from that. And I think what's interesting about the way you're talking about it, at least from my perspective, is like, yeah, transcendence is sometimes just getting down to the truth. It's getting more honest and being more authentic. I definitely experienced that, and I've shared this on the podcast several times about that script that I wrote, Love Lust, which was the first time where I actually kind of found my voice, I felt, as a writer, my real true voice. And I've actually been studying storytelling a lot recently, well, a fair amount. And something that was one of the things that was shared with the course that I'm doing was how storytelling is about sharing a truth through a lie. It's like you're making it up, but what's important is that you're telling a truth. But what's really important is not just that you're telling a truth, but you're telling a little bit more of a truth than you're comfortable with within the context of something made up. And when this was said in the class, I was like, oh my God, that's so true. That's exactly what it was like with Love Lust. I was sharing a truth inside of me that was more than I wanted to share with people, but it was hidden within the context of this story. And what's interesting about this story, and I think why it's been quite positively received, is that that truth that I shared is kind of a truth that everybody has. It's my own version of it, but it kind of resonates with people because they like people wrote me back after I did my literary review like submissions, and one person wrote back, and I remember this one very vividly. They said, it reminded me of what it was like to fall in love for the first time. And that chaotic, crazy kind of passion that is almost it's untethered. It's just very unbounded, and it really, they talked about how it kind of reminded them of what that was like. And I thought, like, they shared more, but I thought that was kind of cool because there was this part of me that was battling with that part of love, so much different variations of what love is. And when you feel like you don't have any of it, the depression, the sadness, the sorrow, the desire and the necessity for connection that comes with that, and I was really investigating that for myself, betrayal, all these things that kind of come into that, right? And I thought it was so cool because there's this part of my story that had that in there, and that person, like, they were like, I got that. And I was like, wow, like something uncomfortable in me, I shared in that, which helped them to experience that. And it's like, it's transcendent, I guess, because you're finding, like, when I wrote that story, I was finding something in myself. It was like chipping away from all the bullshit, all the act of like, I'm good, I'm cool, I don't, whatever, all that shit just got kind of stripped away, but through other characters in a different situation. Yeah. And I forget the novelist who was sharing this story in my class, but he wrote a book called, I think, Caroline or Coraline.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about? What's his name? I forget his name. Anyway, he was talking about how he wrote that story, and I was like, oh, it's like, and he was talking about his journey as a writer, and I was like, that's so interesting. It's like, your transcendence sometimes is getting closer to the truth. It's like it's an inside thing, not like I'm going to get better at this, I'm going to become a better writer, I'm going to learn more technique. Mm-hmm. But it's more like I'm going to learn how to tell the truth better with more courage, with less fear, maybe. So what you brought up for me kind of made me kind of go like, that's kind of my David in writing, that's my thing underneath all the stone.
Like with coming to a place of deeper and greater honesty, I guess. And I think that in many ways, like I think that art is a really terrific place to kind of talk about this, because it provides so many wonderful parallels to all of this, because we both come from acting backgrounds as well, and there's all sorts of things that have been said about, like, you're using a lie to tell a great truth, right? And there's a beautiful symbiotic relationship between storytelling and acting and that sort of thing. But it's a space where we talk about things that are often not talked about, and that's very often the role that art has to take up, is to be that communicator, to say the unspeakable thing, so that we can all go, oh, thank God somebody said it, right? Because that opens up, potentially that path for transcendence. And I want to talk a little bit just in terms of like writing as well. It's like, I remember the first sort of book that I picked up on learning how to write a script, right? Like I think it's called just like How to Write a Great Movie by I think it's by Jeff Kitchen or whatever. It was like a really highly recommended book, like that. I don't remember where I read about it. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get that book and pick it up. And And it was a great book. Really kind of breaks it down to like the sort of the nuts and bolts of storytelling and writing a script. But, you know, at the very beginning with any story, if it's not the very first thing, it's one of the first 2 or 3 things that you have to do with your story, but I'm pretty sure it's the very first. And that is, what's the theme? What is the theme of the story that you are about to write? Because it's got to be about something. And, you know, and this is a guy who has done, like, you know, he gets hired on to go in and fix scripts. You know, studios hire him to come in and just, like, when things aren't working, just to consult and tell them what's wrong with their story.
Yeah.
And, you know, and for him, it's like, it's that the whole theme is the who cares test, right? It's just like, okay, you've told me this thing, but who cares? What's this story about? Yes, you've got these people, and, you know, even if it's an action movie with like over the top stuff, but like, who cares? What is it about? Why do I care about all, you know, cars flying through the air and explosions and helicopter chases and all of that shit? Why do I care? And why do I care about these people that are in it? What is it all about? And it's because it's got to be about something more, you know, or it's got to elicit something within our humanity that makes us give a shit. And it's beyond all of those sort of the flash and the, you know, like the flash and the style and of explosions and car chases, right? Like, those are all just things. You know, they're all things and they're great, but they only take you so far. You know, they only have so much meaning to them. And, you know, I don't trash on people too much, but it was like, God. And don't get, like, I want to give some credit because he's created in a style and whatever. But, you know, my wife and I, we threw on an old Michael Bay movie like a few weeks ago, because we're like, oh, like, I remember, like, in high school, really, like, this was really enjoying this and having a lot of fun with it. And we got about 10 minutes in and we had to turn it off. And I'm just like, I just can't do it. I just can't, you know, because I was just like, because I just, this is all just, for me, it was just like, this is all just nonsense. This is all just a bunch of, you know, flashy bullshit. It looks great, don't get me wrong. Like, it's just like, there's lots of incredible technique that's going on in the filmmaking itself, in terms of, like, you know, the craft of some of these things. I don't want to devalue that, but there's a large degree to which is like, yeah, but why do I care about what's happening right now on my screen? And I'm like, I don't. So there's something that I believe we fundamentally, as human beings, we crave to have that honesty and that truth spoken to us, that helps us see in a different way, that helps us to look at our lives in a deeper, more meaningful, potentially deeper and more meaningful way. So I don't know. I think that there's just all of these different forms of transcendence that we deal with in our lives.
What Michael Bay movie was it?
It was Bad Boys 2.
Ah.
Yeah. But honestly, like, and I'm going to go on just for a little bit further, you know, because, like, I've watched a lot of Michael Bay movies in my life and enjoyed many of them, but I'm just like, I don't think I can do them anymore. There's just something that I just can't do anymore.
Yeah, I get that. I do. And I think with that is kind of that's kind of evidence of your transformation, because there's a certain point, and with movies and shows in particular, where you transcend as a person, and what was once enjoyable at one time is not really enjoyable at another time. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, you know, there's no arguing that Michael Bay is an extremely successful filmmaker who has found a certain style and delivery that is makes a lot of money. This was an argument I used to have in film school with my teachers. I used to be like, yeah, but they're making movies and you aren't. And they're making a shitload of money. So like, let's not, because they used to, in film school, they were like, these American movies are shit. It's like, that's basically, I mean, they didn't say it that way, but that's basically what they're saying. And then they'd pick out some art film and I'd be like, yeah, I get all the film art in this, but, and as cool as that is, this movie made like $12. So like, let's talk about that. Right. But I hear that because I think I've enjoyed a lot of Michael Bay films as well, and a lot of other films that are Michael Bay like, this very high-end, flashy entertainment. And I think that art has many types of services and deliveries, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with creating art that isn't like high art, that isn't like really artistic. But I think art gives us or creativity gives us a certain amount of depth. And I think as you get older, things that are more, I don't know, flashy, superficial become less interesting. I think the film industry, and I feel like I can speak on this to some degree, at least from a business side of things. Maybe just because I hang out with a lot of producers. But like, the thing is like movies kind of work in the sense that 15-year-olds, people of that kind of, say, maturity level. I mean, you might be 30 and be like a 15-year-old, but people of that maturity level will continue to exist indefinitely. And so there always needs to be a product that is for them. And so I think that, there is a certain part of, as an artist, like, you might be doing more of a service than an art. And I don't think there's any problem with that. I think that as a viewer, and maybe as a filmmaker, I don't know, maybe you want to evolve with your art, but I think as a viewer, I just want to kind of point this out because I think it's, I don't want to kind of take away from the fact that someone like Michael Bay does provide a service in the film industry. It's a very specific type of service. And there is obviously a demand for it, and it works. Going back to the theme thing, I'm not saying because I'm not really a fan of Michael Bay films anymore. But for my, I think 15th birthday or 16th birthday, maybe 12th, I don't know, somewhere down there, somewhere when I was younger, I saw Bad Boys 1, and I brought all my friends. We did it for my birthday, and we all went and saw Bad Boys 1. He did that one, didn't he?
I don't know if he did the first one. I know he did the second one.
This kind of screws my point. But either way, whether he did it or not is irrelevant. It's a kind of film which is very much about the style of the film. It's very much an action film. It's very much a buddy movie. It's very much fun. It's not high art. It's not, super depthy, big themes. But we loved it. We had an amazing experience. If I was to watch that movie again, I'd probably be like, yeah, it was fun. But you know what? Nothing's going to replace the time in my life when I experienced that. So Transcendence, my point about this is Transcendence is something like, at one time in your life, something is perfect. And in another time, it's just not the right fit. And you mentioned earlier in your story about how you enjoyed this film at one point. And you're like, yeah, this is a lot of fun. And then you watch it with your wife now and you're older and you're like 10 minutes in, you're like, fuck that, I'm out. You know what I mean? But that's a sign of your transcendence, and I think like this is something we should take note of, because things that we think we like or think work, they worked at a time. And when you transcend, they don't work anymore. And we need to evolve and be open to the evolution of these new things, like, and not make it wrong that, I don't like this anymore, so it's shit now. It's like, no, I liked it.
Nobody else should watch it.
Exactly, right?
Like, it's not.
I liked it when I like it. I liked it, and now I don't like it, but I've changed. Okay, I've changed. So this type of movie doesn't really work for me anymore. And then we just kind of can go, hey, that's kind of cool. I changed. I've evolved. So what a neat thing to notice. I have 10 more things to say, Evan, but I'm going to end it there.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that, I was really just trying to use this as like a bit of a jumping off point, and
I think it's a good one.
Yeah. No, like to potentially a broader implication to, the importance of this, to, having a theme and a story, like in our art, like there seems to be this tendency, not just a tendency, but there's a necessity of the art and the artist to speak to something greater.
Is there though? I mean, sorry, I got to challenge this. I got to challenge this idea, because maybe not the artist, but maybe maybe the artist, but maybe the viewer, but maybe both, maybe sometimes neither. Maybe it's kind of a thing where it's like, evolve if you want to evolve if that's part of what your journey is. Don't fight it if you do, but like, don't make it wrong if you don't. Like, maybe evolving or transcending is more of it's not a necessity, but a natural thing you just stumble upon, whereas maybe in our culture, we treat it like you must transcend, you must evolve. And maybe we don't, maybe that's not the point. And maybe making it the point is the problem. It's just a thought that I had as we were kind of working through this, because sorry, and I don't mean to kind of dominate here, but I'm just thinking back to film school. And this was a big issue for me, because in film school, I genuinely wanted to have a film career. And what I found was that it was like the art is right and the business is wrong. And I didn't like that, because to me, it was like, I don't think the business is right and the art is wrong. I feel like if you make either right, you've got a problem. But there's a marriage, there's a relationship, and it's something you need to negotiate and figure out how much of an either you want to be and how you want to work that.
Right. Yeah, no. And I don't disagree with that. And definitely, I think that there can be a value to something just being kind of silly and frivolous, but in that way, that kind of becomes the point,
Yes.
like that, and in which case that becomes a more conscientious, decision then at that point, but I think that, it's, I don't know. It's like, what is it all about? Like, I think that it's for some reason, my mind just keeps coming back around to that question when it comes to this topic of transcendence, like, it's like, well, what is this all about? What is this thing that, if you're an artist and whatever thing, it's just like, well, what is this thing all about? What is it actually really all about for you in what you're saying? And it's not always a guarantee that, that your audience will see that or understand it necessarily. But, I believe and trust that there's a kind of quality that it brings into your work, that it brings into your life when it's about something. I guess in many ways it's about that, that why. Simon Sinek talks about that all the time, and you talk about that, Brandon, a lot of times too. It's like this thing of like, well, what's your why? What is your why? I think that, that's a question of transcendence. That's a question of transcendence. What's your why? Like, yeah, you can do all of these things, but like, why are you doing it? Like, what is it? What's underneath it? What's it for? What's it all about? And that is the thing that can take something very ordinary, something of the garden variety, I suppose, and take it to the transcendent. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's what I'm interested in.
Okay. I like this kind of vein you opened here, that I think back to what kind of opened up my film career to some degree. And, I feel like honestly, I feel like I'm at the beginning of my film career. Like, I feel like everything up to now was like a prequel to like something that might happen if I wanted to. But it's kind of like I had a little bit of a career, a little dance in the world of the film industry, I suppose. But when I first started making films, my why was because it would be fun. My first film I ever made was because it would be fun. Wouldn't this be fun? And it fucking got people so excited because it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, this why thing you kind of opened up is like, yeah, transcendence doesn't have to be some heady, complicated, like profound thing. It can be so simple. Like, why do you play? Because it would be fun. Why do I, and like, I think when I wrote this script, Love Lost, which I just mentioned a second ago, it's like, that wasn't because it would be fun. That was not because it would be fun. Not in the slightest. It was because I genuinely wanted to investigate what is love, really. And what does it mean to love somebody? And what does it mean to be loved? And what does it mean to feel as though you don't have love? I felt that not just for me, but for others, that they would care about that. And I think it, as far as at least the experience of the script has gone thus far, I sound like such a juice. Thus far. But it's like, no, as far as that's gone, I feel like, oh, wow, that got through. But the why was not this very like playful, let's have fun. It was this, let's investigate this. Let's like dig into it. And let's go into my greatest fears. Let's go into the things that I think are absolutely unapproachable. And let's talk about that. Let's try and do that in a script. You know what I mean? Like, that's what that was about. And, I'm thinking like with this theme thing you brought up earlier, because I found theme to be like theme is something that you think in the beginning. It's sometimes true by the end, but often you discover it partway through or sometimes after the fact. And you thought you were doing this, and then you realized, oh, I was actually doing this. Like, I don't think I could honestly say that I knew what I was doing when I wrote Love Lost. But after, in hindsight, I go, oh, it's so clear what I was doing. Not because I went into it with lack of clarity, but because when things are very heart driven, I think what ends up happening is there's something like your muse is leading you. It's not really, it's not so conscious. It's conscious in a way, but it's unconscious in a whole other way. And you're more like a surfer on a wave. That's how I look at it. It's like, I see the wave coming. I'm going to catch the wave. I'm going to get myself in a position. But then once you're on the wave, you have to work with wherever the wave takes you and whatever it does. And transcendence, like, I don't know if you've ever surfed, but surfing is frightening. But standing up on the board on a wave is like, there's a transcendence that must occur. Because the first thing that happened, at least for me, is you get picked up. If you surf too big of a wave, probably did. But if you surf too big of a wave, and I was in Hawaii and I could see the coral reef underneath me, and I was like, I'm going to die. That was it. And it was so fucking frightening. And I did not stand up the first bunch of times. And I was actually scared to catch waves because I'm just like, I'm going to die. I wanted to do this my whole life and I'm going to die. And eventually you figure it out. And when you do, you're like, holy shit, I've overcome fear. And just the whole attempt at trying is transcendent, let alone even accomplishing it and even doing it, but I feel like there's something and this was a point that I will get to eventually, but I feel like there's something in the doing of it that's you're not totally aware of. Like playing. I'm not totally aware. I know it's going to be fun, or I hope it's going to be fun, but then something else happens during play, that's the magic, that's the transcendent magic for me, at least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can relate somewhat. I've only tried surfing once, and and they weren't big waves, but decent sized waves that you could do a little bit of surfing on. And this was in Costa Rica, and I remember that feeling of just like, trying and trying and trying, and then finally like having that one sort of like experience of like getting up on the board and like basically riding a wave like all the way in, and feeling like, like feeling like a champion. Like, what's that line from the Beach Boys song? Like, catch a wave and you're sitting on top of the world or something like that.
Yeah.
It's such a great, I mean, those are such, it's just, it's the Beach Boys who are actually like really musically quite an incredible band. Quite sophisticated, more than people think, but like, what an incredible line, because it's so true. And that was funny because then my wife showed me like the picture after, or like she captured it on video, and I looked at the video and I was just like, oh, I wish I hadn't seen that, because because it's like I felt like I was just like some slick shit, man, up there. And then I saw this video and it was like, it looked like I was like riding on nothing. And I was just sort of like stiff and rigid on the board. I was just like, oh, I felt like such a badass, and now I just feel like I look like an idiot.
Well, that's I gotta kind of interject here, because that's kind of what art is like in the beginning. You're writing the script or you're acting this part and you think you're so great, and then it's just not. Because when you're in it, I mean, I think this is the thing, like sometimes all that matters is the experience. And I think early on with a lot of stuff, the experience needs to be enough. I think, when people get really proficient at something like surfing or writing a script or acting or painting or whatever, it becomes more about that final result and what that looks like, because that's more what you're doing. But I think sometimes people shoot themselves in the foot because they want it to look beautiful when they begin. And part of transcendence is that humility of what you experienced on the wave. When I thought I was going to die, I mean, it might have been a bit bigger than that, but it was still probably wimpy. You know what I mean? Like, it was probably like, and I remember being like, I'm going to die. I'm going to cut my face open and I'm going to die. Like, I'm just like, I'm going to eat by a shark. It's like the stupidest, whatever. But I was so new to it, and I think this is a good part of the conversation, because we need to consider that transcendence, there's those later stages of it where you're refining, but those are the early stages of it where you're just figuring it out. And they're different stages of transcendence. They're a different part of the journey, a different part of the growth, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you actually brought this back kind of around to the whole journey part of, what we've titled this episode, because there is like there's different stages, and because sometimes like I think in many ways one of the things about transcendence is that it's kind of a surprise. And in fact, I think that it always has to be a surprise, but there's a way of putting yourself on a trajectory towards the unknown, because it's like, I know even from, like scripts that I've written where, I've done the thing, like we talked about, like, okay, this is the theme, this is what it's about and whatever. And I've written the first draft of that script, and then sometimes by the time of getting to the end of writing it, or then after going back and reading through that first draft again, I go, oh, holy shit, what I thought this story was about was not the story that I thought it was when I set out. This is what the story is about. And then it goes to that thing of refining, because I'm like, okay, no, now I know what the story is about. And now I go back and go through the process of tweaking and changing things that help that sort of thing to come out more, for that thing to make it sort of its presence felt on a deeper level. But it's an incredible thing when that happens, because there's sort of like a transcendence that happens in that moment of discovering that it's not what you thought it was about, right? And then you go down this path of like, okay, well, now we're going to go down this path, and who knows, maybe it will end up becoming something else that you didn't even imagine at that point. I think that it's there's a living, breathing quality to this whole thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do. I think it's something, there's kind of like some of the elements of what we talk about, in the whole way of the artist kind of conceptual philosophy. We talk about the law of presence, we talk about the law of the unknown. Those things seem to be very relevant with this talk because, the law of the unknown is the part where to do anything that's actually somewhat profound, even if it's just for you, not profound to anyone else. It could be totally normal to everyone else, but it could be totally profound for you. Like surfing for me for the first time was profound. It was a profound experience. In the scope of the world, it's not profound because many people have done it and experienced it. But for me, in those moments, it was profoundly new, nothing like I'd ever experienced before. And I think there's a part of the unknown going into this thing. And, you might go into it with all sorts of hopes and dreams and wishes and whatever, but it's still unknown. You don't really know until you're in it doing it. Like I'd seen people surf, I'd watched movies, I had talked to friends, but then all of a sudden I was on the wave trying to surf and it was something else, and the other part about the presence part, you got to be present. You just like when you're in the unknown, the only way to survive it, and I don't think that's too dramatic of a word, but the only way to survive it is to be present. You have to be. If you're thinking about anything other than what you're doing and being in that moment, you're dead. You're done. It's over.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're dead literally, but you're dead. You crash. You're dead. You fall off the whole thing. And there's like the discovery of what it is, how to do it, the evolution. Like surfing's such a great example because you start laying down. You start by laying down and then getting up kind of slowly and then getting up to your feet. And there's all these transformations that must occur in the immediacy of a wave that's happening. And, it's kind of like this transformation. Every step of the way, you have to be on the ball about it, but you don't really know what you're doing until you're doing it. And it might take you several times. You might fail as you're trying it, but eventually you fail the first step and then you pass the first step, but you fail the second, and then you pass the first two and then you fail the third. And a lot of things kind of work that way. There's transcending is kind of just figuring it out little by little and trial and error and doing it over and over. But every single time, even though you've been there before, you have to be present again as though it's the first time, even with the script, even with acting.
Like presence and honesty and dedication, to a certain extent, and passion. As you're talking about this, I think about this in terms of acting, and a lot of the times what I confront students with, which is, like that sort of that need to create something beautiful, that need to be interesting, and for all of these things to be recognized, for people to see these things in you, that when that's in your mind, it takes you further and further away from that very thing that you're trying to accomplish. But through listening and attention and dedication to the presence and being an honest expression of the truth of the moment, and that moment being being sort of the entirety of all that is happening in that instant. And that includes your partner and yourself and the thing that is happening between you. And when you can be an honest expression of that, just through sheer attention, that it becomes riveting. And that's sort of kind of like getting up on the wave. Like I remember, a lot of actors have sort of like these moments, but I really remember for myself, at a certain point in my training, getting up on that wave for like the first time, like really getting up there and riding it through and being like, wow, that everything has changed for me. Like everything changed for me in that moment as an actor in terms of my work and what I understood my work to be and where I needed to go with what I did from that point forward, because it was a sense of liberation to a certain extent, kind of a sense of liberation from myself, of all of the sort of controls and needs and just my own bullshit that kind of got in my way, and just being like, oh, in this space, something can happen. But in order for me to be in this space, there's kind of I have to let go of myself. I have to let go of so much of that bullshit, as I mentioned. And we've got lots of it. I know I've got lots of bullshit. But to let go of that and to get to that point, it was a journey, to get to that point of transcendence, and there was battles, there was good days and there was bad days. And it took a level of dedication, but there was underneath it, it was a passion. There was a passion for me as an actor to find something, like it was, I kind of describe it as like I was looking for something in my work as an actor that I didn't really know what it was, but I just felt like I would know it when it happened. And I was just searching for it. And then having it happen, and sure enough, I knew it. But like, there's just something, even when you can't put your finger on it, and I think that's part of the essential nature of this transcendent thing. There's something, and I don't know what it is, but there's something, and it's just pushing me along, or it's pulling me along, however you sense that thing, but it's there. And in many ways, that thing is more real than fucking anything else. You know what I mean? Even though you can't necessarily touch it, and you don't even know what it is. There's a reality to it that is more real than the fucking hand on your body. You know what I mean?
It's this experience, I think, when you talk about that, I actually think a lot of people long for. They don't know it, and they have little to no experience of it. There's something about being an artist, I think, which is such a incredible thing to try and venture into, to do it genuinely, wholeheartedly. To really try to give yourself to some type of thing. And I'm not just talking art. It doesn't have to be art. It could be like a hobby, but to give yourself to the thing, to be at the mercy of the wave of this thing, I'm sure there are many actors who have been in class that have done Oscar-worthy performances, that have done performances so profound that they had a moment where they were just dialed in, and they they caught that wave for a moment, and it was incredible. And it was never recorded, and the only people that witnessed it were the people in that class, and maybe they've had glimpses of it, but it's like, I think the thing is like, something that I've been realizing, like I've written a lot of scripts, but how many of them are good? Probably not as many as I've written. But it's like, okay, so that's fine. But I feel like I can only honestly at this point say that I've written one good script, but I would say that, that's probably pretty common for most writers who are either professional or semi-professional. They kind of, your last script was your best script usually, and you're like, everything else was shit because you figured it out, and then you're like, yeah, but now that's shit because I just figured out some new stuff.
Yeah,
but it's kind of that thing I go back to about the wave thing. You thought you were king shit when you were on the one wave, but then you saw a video and you're like, oh yeah, like that wasn't as big of a deal as I thought. But that doesn't matter to some degree, because when you were on it, you experienced being on top of the world. And you go back to the Beach Boys, for example, and it's a silly lyric, but it's like surf a wave, you're on top of the world. I think it's something like that, right? It's like, it's kind of like, there's something kind of true about it. It's like, you might be singing a poppy little song that's kind of fun to sing along, but there's some kind of truth of experience in there. And I think when it comes to
like I just
go
want to
ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, like I just want to like that's exactly what we're talking about, like, or at least from the beginning of this conversation, that's exactly like the sort of a perfect illustration of the pointing that we're talking about. Like, it's a stupid little silly Beach Boys, and it works that way. It does work as a stupid little song about surfing, but kind of knowing what I know about the Beach Boys and the people of that band, like those words are exactly intentional. It was like, yeah, it works as this fun little pop song, but there was something more that they were pointing to in that whole thing, like that like they're, and maybe people will say it's like, oh, you're reading too much into it, but catch a wave, you're sitting on top of the world. Like there's incredible metaphor and imagery to that whole thing, like that we could just pry into that and open up so much meaning in those words, and it's just like, well, what does the wave mean? We could talk about it as like the creative impulse, we could talk about it as, who knows, like there's so many ways that you could go with that, but this is precisely the whole thing where it's like, that's such a big Beach Boys song, like it's like one of their greatest hits, right? And it works. You just kind of can sing along to it and bop your head along to it and blast it in your car or whatever. But I like to think that part of the reason why it has had its power is because it captures something else too. And not just in the words, but the sound. The Beach Boys sound was about exactly. that being on like the beach in the sunshine. It was about freedom and youth, and like there's all of this stuff that just there was a whole message. There was something that was carrying that touched us, and I believe that something, while you can't completely control it, there is something that's still very deliberate about that whole thing that they created. So thank you for letting me hijack that for a second, Brandon.
Oh, I like it. I do. And I think something else about this Beach Boys song, which is so far from what I thought we'd be talking about, but somehow so relevant. The sound,
totally.
The sound of that song and the sound of a lot of the songs they had, where did that, like, this is something I've been thinking a lot about recently, because I've been kind of playing around with a DJ machine with one of our friends and making beats and figuring out how to do some of this stuff. But finding sound is such a fascinating thing to me. And as we've been doing it, it's not like, there's kind of like, okay, well, I want to make this one a little more emo, or I want to make this one a little more dancey, or I want to figure out how to drop the beat, into this thing, right? Um, but when you look at that song of the Beach Boys, that experience of like being on top of the world on a wave, it gets morphed into the actual sound of the song, which makes the song perfect. But like the way they found their sound and their voice was unique to their experience. So like I think this kind of goes back to an earlier point we mentioned, which is that transcendence kind of seems to me very evident that it has to come from a place of truth. Like you got to get down to an honesty, like whether it's through music or through a script or through a painting or through, some activity you're doing or some hobby you have, you got to get connected to like this underlying thing. And I think particularly with art, it becomes more evident. Like there's a tonality to stuff. Um, there's a tone to movies or to songs or to whatever that informs the more tangible digital stuff. The lyrics work in a unique way because of the sound that was formed around the lyrics and the whole flow and all of these elements, for them to come together in the magical way in which they do, requires a certain submission to the muse. And what I mean by the muse is you can look at that in a woo-woo way, in a spiritual way if you want, and I'm not saying it isn't, but the allowance of your experience of that almost unknown part of yourself to come out through your artistic expression and match and marry and find itself with whatever you're doing. And then all of a sudden people go, wow, that's so unique. That's so cool. That's so one of a kind. And it's like, well, that's because your truth is one of a kind. And that's kind of the thing I think transcendence, at least from an artistic perspective, is, at least from the internal point of view that you've kind of brought into this conversation. It's the David underneath the stone. It's you don't even know what it is. You got to just start chipping away at all the blocks, and then all of a sudden it's going to reveal itself to you. And I think that's hard for people to accept because they think I need to know what I'm doing before I do it. And it's like, not necessarily. You need to have an idea of what you're doing. But after you have the idea, you have to give yourself some, like, you have to submit to some degree that what you think you know is going to be revealed to you. Mm-hmm. And it's maybe you could call it subconscious or something else, but it's this whole embodiment. Another thing I want to say, and I don't want to forget this point because I feel like it's the perfect time to bring it up. It's like, this is why I think self-improvement for the sake of self-improvement is bullshit. Because just think about it this way. If you're like, I need to improve myself, I need to get better, I need to like learn more. All you're doing when you do that is telling yourself that somehow you're not enough and you need to be more. That's all that does. So that's a fucking fleeting thing. In our Western culture, people are after self-help. Like fucking, it's $1 billion industry. It's like stupid. The thing is if you look at it this way, pick a goal, pick an endeavor, pick something you want to do and figure out. You will naturally self-improve. If you commit and dedicate yourself to it, you will naturally self-improve because you'll figure out what you need to do to improve to do it if you're truly committed and dedicated to it. So self-improvement is really a byproduct. To chase a byproduct is so stupid. It's like you're not chasing anything. You're chasing fluff because being better is not the point. Being better is what happens when you're on point.
Yeah, and in many ways, there's not really a sense of being better because in order, like the thing is like being better, like it implies a than.
Yeah, it's also not present because it's like one day I'll be enough.
Yeah, it's like when you're just, when you're kind of just doing your thing, when you're riding that wave, there's no sense of doing of better. There's just a sense of whatever the fuck you're doing next.
Yes.
And by next, I mean, what am I doing now?
Yeah. What
you
am
know,
I doing
what's-
now?
Yeah.
And then
what's
all of a
that thing?
sudden, you've surfed the wave, you come into the shore, and you're better. And you don't necessarily need to gauge how much better you are. You just are because you did it. And then you do it again. And you could argue that you're a little better. How much better? Who knows? But like, you will be like it. Like when I started surfing, it sounds like a little bit different than when you started surfing because you sounds like you had a lesson and then you went out to the water. I didn't have that. I
didn't have a
bodyboarded.
lesson.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, for me, my friends just dragged me out into the water, and I don't even know if I got up the first time I went out to the water. Like I think I just struggled and got nearly drowned.
Yeah.
But the second time they brought me out, I figured out how to stand up. You know, not well, but I did. But they brought me out into like the waves they surfed, and they were very experienced. And so, I guess I bring this up because like there's a certain amount of like how do you put this? Just like I wanted to figure out how to do it. So it was absolutely necessary that I became better. That was it. Like it wasn't I'm going to become better because I need to be better. It was I need to become better because if I don't become better, I won't be able to do this thing I really want to do. And I feel like that form of self-improvement is fucking awesome. But the type of self-improvement where it's like, I need to get better to self-improve for something that one day might happen, maybe, that's bullshit because that's just procrastination glorified.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's just total bullshit.
That you bring up a really, I think, an important distinction that makes it very kind of clear of sort of a bullshit game that we play with ourselves, which this whole thing of better is like, well, yeah, sometimes there is a place where you do need to get better, but it only becomes like in your story, it's clear what you need to do. It's clear how you need to get better because you're doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you already understand what it is that you need to do, or at least you understand that there is something you need to get better because you're trying to do the thing and it's not happening, right? So now you at least have a place to work off of. But I think that for so many of us, you know, like I guess in the context of, you know, the dreams that we're not pursuing, you know, the things that we feel passionate about that we're not taking any action on, you know, and that we say, oh, well, I'm not this enough or not that enough. Well, it's like, well, that's all just speculative. You know what I mean? It's like you don't, at least maybe I'll just speak for myself here, but I know there's been instances in my life where it's like, well, I actually don't know. I actually don't know that I'm not good enough. I'm just sort of made an assumption that I'm not, that I need to get more, you know, I need to get more knowledge. I need to get more skill. I need to get this before I even attempt it. Right. And it's just like, well, do you need to do that? Like, is that actually the thing that is stopping you from taking action on this thing right now? Like, you know, we use this example a lot, but I mean, it's like, if you've always wanted to like write a book or a screenplay or something, what is stopping you? Like, there's actually for most people, there's probably nothing stopping you. Most people have a computer. You know, if you've got like a screen and a keyboard, you know, like you can start, you can begin doing that thing. It might not be any good, right? But you don't necessarily know what your weaknesses are as a writer yet until you started. You don't even know what skills you need to work on. You know what I mean? But I think that, and this is somewhat of a side path here, but I think that a lot of the time training can end up, it can end up destroying some of your natural sensibilities.
I agree.
Like
I totally agree.
That's a thing that can happen. Like, it's not to say don't get training, like, and don't, you know, get skills in what you're doing. But I have experienced and I have seen people who they end up losing something that's kind of special about their work, because they become so attached to the training and the techniques and the skills that they learned through whatever institutions that they went through. And it's like, yeah, but like there was something in those things before you even stepped into a class. There was something that you had there. There was an innocence. There was a vulnerability. There was a quality to your work that came to it. So what I mean to say is, maybe you haven't taken the class, maybe you haven't gotten the training, but you will understand where it is you need to grow and develop, but you will also start to learn where you have beautiful instincts, where you have like a beautiful thing to offer into whatever it is that you're doing, before any sort of, ideas of what it should and should not be can even enter into the equation. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, man. I got some things to say.
All right.
I love that you brought this in, because like training for the sake of training. I think there's a problem in that as well, just like self-improvement. It's like I look back at, my training in acting and writing and stuff like that. And with acting, I think with acting in particular, if you're in an acting class, I don't think you should go to acting class to become a better actor. I don't think that's why you should go to acting class. I think you should go to acting class because you want to explore what acting is. I think you should go to it because you want to have some fun, because you enjoy it, because you want to try things out. With no intention but other than to try things out, experience it, and just work around it. And through that, it will become self-evident by doing it, what you need to do and where you need to apply yourself. But if you go to acting class, like, I'm going to figure out how to be an actor, you're going to fuck yourself all up. And I feel like there was a part of me that did that. And I think probably you had this experience as well. And it just confuses you, because you start thinking that people have the answer and the way and the technique that you need. And if you just have the technique and you just understand it, you'll know what to do. And, where did these techniques come from? They came from probably watching other actors do natural things and trying to break that down and understand it. So a big part of what I've been finding about, even teaching, but doing my craft as well, is to not come from a place of understanding it, but to come from a place of exploring it. So something I do, like with my clients, for example, is I go, let's explore story. I'll give you some options, some ideas you can play with, like the hero's journey. I'll give you, like, I'll present these theories to you, but let's not be stuck with that. It's an option. It's a way that has been done and you can go, but it's not the way, and it's not the only way by any means. It has certain elements to it that you might look at and go, I'll take that, I'll abandon that, whatever. But you don't have to stick to it like a paint by numbers, because once you do that, you're fucked, because now you're caught in it, right? And it's a trap. It's a way, but it's also someone else's way. And man, there's so many ways in which I want to take this, but like, if you come at it from a place of experience, if you come at it from a place of discovery, you get to find out about you. And I think that the new model of teaching and mentorship is not about someone looking on stage and seeing an authority tell them what to do. It's about the person on stage telling the person listening that they need to listen to themselves. And I know people don't like this, because we're so trained to like look at someone on stage and go, give me the answers, tell me what to do. I think that's absolutely it's only good if you're going to be a technician. Like, if you're going to do some kind of job where you have to paint by numbers and do exactly as they want you to do, it works that way, like in an industrial model, because that's where it came from. But from an artistic model, you need to see that you're the authority. And what you have is a mentor that encourages you to find it within yourself. Ted Whittle, who was on the podcast, which I highly recommend that people listen to that episode, somewhere around the 90s, I think. He was one of those teachers that for me, he was someone who said, it's in you to find, not me to tell you what to do. Essentially, that's the message I got from him.
Mm-hmm.
And he profoundly shifted my life as an artist, because instead of looking outward for some guru or some master or some teacher to give me the answer to help me get over the hump that I felt I was behind, I started to realize that the hump was inside me, and that it was something I needed to go up against. And my limitations in some ways were because I kept looking outward for answers instead of looking inward for answers. And it's a whole different model of looking at the world. And it's very uncomfortable because, you don't have somebody telling you what to do, and you don't have there's no clarity in it, right? It's a very much like, to go back to the example, just to kind of finalize this point, when you're on the wave, it's you on the wave. Nobody is there with you. It is just you and that wave. And you're going to have to figure out what to do. And people can tell you all the tricks and all the secrets and all this stuff, but you're going to have to figure out how to get the courage up to go down the wave, to stand up on the wave, and to embrace the wave. You're going to have to figure out how to do that. And that's all going to be you. And I think that I hope and I think that the future is people embracing that more. And I think it's absolutely necessary, because I think as we move away from the industrial world, we're going to start to see why that matters so much.
Yeah, 100%. Like there's been a number of people who have already said that this is the direction that we're heading into as a world, like with a lot of sort of the jobs that people do now, like a good chunk of them are all going to be automated within the next 10 years. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of jobs, like all becoming automated over the next few years. The future of what we do as people, as vocations, as work, has everything to do with creativity and empathy. Those are the sort of the skills that are going to be required of us in the future, which is, so we need to transcend some of these models of thinking. We need to transcend this idea of, the person handing down solutions from the mountaintop. And like you said, that's a scary thing to realize that, in many ways, there's no one that has the answers for you. That no one has the answer to your life. And in many ways, you don't even have the answer to your life. But as scary as it is, it's, to me, I'm like, I remember confronting that a few years back, after going through a dark period of time, but just like really confronting this thing that I was just like, oh my God, like no one can help me with this. Like nobody really can help me with this thing that I'm facing. And I'm the one who has to face it. And it's alarming and it's scary. But the thing is that it was still a beautiful thing, because to go along as if somebody can give me the answers, that's just as scary and confusing. There's nothing, you're kind of on a futile quest at that point in time. And so you kind of have to accept the futility of that direction. And as you begin to learn to listen to yourself and to trust yourself and in your ability to just kind of go and live and create and just respond to what happens. Then it becomes what was once a scary thing becomes kind of a liberating thing. It becomes an exhilarating thing, because you don't need that outside confirmation. You don't need that outside validation for what you're doing anymore, because that's a scary thing when you need those things.
It's very much fly by the seat of your pants. I think that we could all benefit from flying by the seat of our pants a little bit more. And that's kind of the throwing yourself into the unknown that you want to explore and just figuring it out while you're there. It's like, it's like life is so exciting when it becomes exploring. Life is so fascinating and so interesting when you step into this world that is unknown, and it doesn't really take a lot. It can be so simple. I mean, for example, talk to a stranger. That's a fascinating thing to do, and people won't do it because it's scary and they're worried about all this shit, like what might happen. Like, think about it this way. You got 3 places you can live in at any time you want. You can live in the past, you can live in the future, or you can live right now. And there's only one that's true. And it's the third. It's right now. Those 2 don't exist. The past is gone and it's done. And even if the way you think you remember it, you're not remembering it properly anyway, so it's not real. And the future, you don't know what's going to happen. So people, they do this dance where they hop into whichever world of the 3 whenever it's convenient. So I don't want to talk to a stranger because what might happen? So catch yourself in the act. Right now, you're here, they're there. Do it. And as you're talking to them, you will figure it out. And maybe it doesn't work out so well, but you'll start to figure it out. Something that, for me, when I went to college, right? I've talked about this and, whatever, it's my truth. So, you know what, judge it or don't, I don't give a shit. But something that I wanted to do when I went to college was I wanted to learn how to talk to women. I wanted to learn how to connect with women. I wanted to be able to date the kind of women I wanted to date. And I didn't want that to be a limit in my life. So I made a decision that if I saw a girl that I was attracted to, I would go up and talk to her. Don't think, just do. That was my motto. And I became quite successful at this. And I remember one of the guys that I was hanging around with at the time, he's, what do you say to these girls? Like, what do you do? And I was like, hi, how's it going? And he's like, come on. I was like, no, it's honestly what I do. I just say, hi, how's it going? That was my opener. And he just didn't believe me. But I was like, and I stopped him and I explained, I'm like, look, here's what I figured out. I'm a stranger to this person. I'm talking to them all of a sudden. They don't expect it. What I noticed by doing it was most people didn't even hear the first thing I said. All they heard was maybe hi, because all they realized was like, someone is talking to me. Because that's how I experience it. If a random stranger comes up to me and I don't see them coming, I'm usually like, oh, someone's talking to me. If they said something witty, I probably miss it. So I learned very quickly that overthinking it was usually a bad choice. Just start the conversation. Then they would respond hi, how's it going? Oh, it's good. Or whatever they'd say. And I would respond in a genuine, authentic way. And of course, that opened up a conversation because it was true. There was no lie. There was no deception. It was just, I was actually asking them, how are you doing? What's going on? Or if I could make a comment about the environment, I would. And that would be true. And they would respond. And based on their response, I would have another truthful comment. That was presence. That was now. That was real. And it worked. every time I start to get in my head about what might happen, what they might say, what they might do, or how something didn't work out in the past, it just messes the whole thing up. And this sounds so basic and so obvious, but the bottom line is people are not present and they think things are impossible because when you live in the past and you live in the future, which don't exist, you cannot have success. Just like riding the wave. You have to ride the wave you're on. You don't ride the next wave and you don't ride the wave before. You ride the wave that you're on. And I think that transcendence happens as you experience it. It evolves as you're on it. But if you try to game the system, if you try to get ahead of it, you're screwed up. You're all messed up. So I know you know this through acting because you basically teach this, but like, it's just so true in life. It's not even art. It's just like, and this took me a fucking lifetime up till now to learn, like it's weird how you can do something successfully when you're younger and not know what you're doing. But really, I look at all my successful moments and they were all because of presence and authenticity. And the things that went astray or went off was because I was living in the past or the future. They weren't authentic and they weren't present. And it's pretty much, if you pick any example in my life, if I shared any story, it would probably bring up pretty much the same thing, regardless of what it is.
And I would also say a healthy dose of a healthy splash of daring as well.
Yes.
Well, Brandon, we've talked for longer than I thought we were going to with this one. Let's talk about just the beverages that we're having and wrap this one up.
All right. Well, my glass here, by the way, it says a drinking jar on the bottom, which I thought was kind of fun. Has nothing to do with the beer, but it says that. So this is from Hoyne Brewing Co. Carte Blanche, and it's a Belgian white IPA.
Nice.
And I like it. It is tasty. It is. I always love a Belgian white. With the IPA, you know what? I mean, I guess that's supposed to be hoppy. It's not too bad. If you like the hops, it's not too much. If you don't like the hops, it's not too much. It's a winner.
Nice.
So I like it.
Nice.
A little dry.
I like a dry beer.
Yeah.
All right. I'm having one that I've had before, but I think it's like a seasonal one. So I was just like, I saw it and I was like, yep, that's gonna happen. I'm having the Electric Unicorn from Phillips Brewing, and it's a white IPA.
Oh.
Hop infused white ale.
So we're both having white IPAs.
Yeah.
Belgian.
Best enjoyed while riding a mystical mono-horned laser beast racing through the galaxy to the sonic backdrop of screaming metal guitars.
How could you not read that?
Yeah. It's a good one. It's quite the description for a brew, of course. All right. Well, do we have any closing comments for this one? I mean, we went down some rabbit holes and went off on some tangents on this one. Since I'm talking, I guess I'll just say my piece. Yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm just going to reiterate some things. Like I honestly, I believe that, a huge part of being a human being, an essential part of being a human being is transcending. That's what we do. We're transcending monsters is what we are. Overcoming things and letting go of things and moving through things. Like it's and coming out with something. I don't know what that something is, but it's a positive thing, or at least it can be a positive thing if we allow it. So ask yourself those questions of the why questions. Why are you doing things that you're doing? What is it that you want to be bringing to the things that you do? Like what do you want to, what are the qualities that you want to imbue into the things in your life, and like, what are the qualities that you want to bring and put into the world? I mean, I think that's a really great place to start because once we can get connected into those types of things, which is in many ways, getting connected into that why we want to do things, the world that we want to create, then whatever we do begins to take on those qualities. It begins to take on something beyond what might just be on the surface. I wholeheartedly believe that that's the case. And when you can do that, when the things that you do begin to take on those bigger, deeper qualities that are meaningful to you, that's when it begins to move into the transcendent. That's when the actions, activities, whatever it is, begin to head into that territory, and where your life begins to head into that territory.
Nice.
Nice.
All right, Evan.
All right, Brandon.
We talked about a lot of stuff. I think there was maybe a few more things I wanted to say, so I'm just going to say them now for my closing argument. Okay.
This was an argument?
No, I know. Just playing. But
I know.
The thing that, obviously, I'll reiterate the one thing. Okay, you got 3 places to live: the past, the future, the present. So choose the present, because it's absolutely essential to whatever you do. Like, you got to be present. And when it comes to the unknown, is a even more proof that being present is more important. Because if you get into the future, when you go into the unknown, you're going to get scared. And if you go into the past, when you go into the unknown, you're going to get anxious. So, mitigate those feelings by just being in the moment. Am I safe right now? Is everything okay right now? Is there a problem right now? And if there isn't, then you can work with that, right? And if there is, you will deal with it. So that is vital. And I think that's a tenet in which this conversation has brought out. So I just wanted to reiterate that. The thing that I will say, I guess, maybe these will spur on other conversations, but let's just kind of look at it this way. Wherever you are right now in this very moment is absolutely perfect. It's absolutely where you need to be and who you need to be. And as I'm saying that, you might be fighting this. I implore you not to. I implore you to question why that's true. Because the moment that you recognize that you don't need to be anything other than what you are, it grants you the permission to take on whatever it is you think you need to take on or want to take on or whatever. By taking that on, by doing it, not talking about it, not planning for it, none of that bullshit, by actually investigating it, doing it, exploring it, trying it, you will become adapted to it. You will transcend this person you are today into whatever you're applying yourself to. And self-improvement will happen as a natural result. And one day you will wake up and realize, holy shit, look who I've become. Look what I've done. Look what's happened.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.